Hi guys, this is Mike Hibbert back with another Python Django tutorial for you, and as promised we're going to be taking the subject of signals a little bit further. Last week we covered the basics of how to actually attach or receive signals through the Django framework, and this time we're going to look at how we can actually set up our own custom signals so that we can then start including extra functionality in our systems that other people can then hook into. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to kind of roughly go over the idea of what I'm going to present here. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to extend the site that we've been building throughout the series, and we're going to add an approval system to the articles. So what we should see on our articles page is we should see a list of articles that have been approved. If you create an article and it's basically put in all your details and then save it, it will not automatically come onto this page, and the reason for that is because the article will need to be approved by somebody, and we're going to do that via the admin system. So we're going to add in an extra section called approvals, and in there, whenever there's an article created, we're going to use the signals to create a brand new approval in the system, and once that's been created we can then go in and tick the tick box to say approved. Once that's been ticked, we're going to use our custom signal to send back a signal to our articles model to tell it that this particular article has been approved, and then once that's been the case, it'll then start a display in here. So it's a very similar thing to have a mediated forum or some other kind of content management system where you don't want to publish information unless someone's looked it over and checked that it's okay to publish. So this could be a useful thing for you in a future project, or if not in the one that you're currently doing. So how do we start off? Well, the first thing we need to do is inside of our Django project, we need to include, alongside our article app, we need to include an approvals app, and this is basically just going to be more or less a model with a few bits of code in there just to include it into the system so that we can then have the approvals connected together with the article, and then the rest of the work is hooking up the article using signals. So the first thing we do is we create, using Django admin py script, start app approvals, and that'll create this folder here and give you a few files like models and tests and views. We're going to add a signals file and an admin file, so I'll show you that later, but that's what you won't see in there when you first create the app. You won't see these two files here, the signals and the admin. We'll do that in a minute, and you also won't see the migrations either. That's for south. But anyway, moving on, we've created the start app, so what we need to do is we need to start off by making an approvals model. So we open up the models.py file that's inside of approvals, and we just basically import models, as we do with all our models, and we want to import signals. Now, we haven't actually created that module yet, but we'll include it now anyway. And from the signals file, we want to include article underscore approved, so that will be inside of this signals file that we'll create or edit later on, and we're going to edit it to create a signal called that. I'll show you that shortly. Next line, we're just going to import some login so that we can actually put information out so that we can know through the login system that this is working. Although we'll probably just see in our tests on a local machine, it might be useful later if we're running it on a remote server. So the first thing is we make our class, our model class, approval, and it has two fields. We have one approved, which is a Boolean field, which is basically just going to be true or false to say this approval has been approved or has not been approved. The default, of course, is that it has not been approved. The second field is our article ID. Now that's just an integer field which will be filled with whatever article this approval has been created by. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do something that we haven't done before. We're going to override the save method. So the models.model class that we're deriving from has a default save method, but we're going to override it. And the reason why we're going to override it is because we want to be able to send a message once this has been saved. We want to send a signal rather to the articles model to say that we have saved this and that something should be done about the approval status of the article. So we do this line first of all, which is to just check. Now if you haven't seen this before, self pk, that says that's the primary key for this model. And what we're saying is if this primary key is not none, so if it's something and not none, so not empty, and this property approved, which we've defined here, is true. If it's not none, this means that it's already been saved the first time, so we're not going to send this message when we first create the approval. We want this to start sending messages after it's been created. So the first time round, this save method will get called on its creation. But we don't want to send messages on its creation. We want to send messages whenever it is altered. And we only want to send that after the first save call. So on the second, third, and other consecutive save calls, we want to send that. So the next line is basically to use our article approved signal that we've defined in our signals file, and we're going to use its method send. Now basically we're sending in an instance of our approval along with this instance's article ID, and it will send a message out to every function that is registered as a receiver of this particular signal that we've defined. The reason why I've got this is basically because that gives us a list of receivers that are registered, and for error checking reasons you can put that in there just to see that it actually is throwing back a list of any receivers at all. So half the problem with signals is that, you know, if something doesn't respond, it's not necessarily obvious straight away why not. So it's always best to be able to say, right, I need a list of all the functions that have actually registered themselves to receive this signal. So we can check that whilst you're debugging. And then again, we've got a little bit of logging just to say confirmed that the article ID was approved. Then finally we call the original save method that comes along with this the Django models class that we're deriving from. So we use the super command with the type of class that's calling, just to let it know which derived class is called and an instance of that class. Then we pass in the keyword arguments that may have been sent across from this save method, and we'll pass that back through to the original save method. So we're just basically adding in this extra little bit of functionality to add in signals to our approval, and then we're calling the original save method anyway. Okay, so that's our model created. The next thing we want to do is we want to actually go and create this actual signal so that we can know pretty much what that actually really is doing. So inside of our approvals folder we create the signals.py file, and when we edit that we should get a blank file, and we're going to do a couple of imports first of all. import Django.dispatch. Now this is the bit that basically allows us to pull in the Django framework for creating our own signals. And what we're going to do is we're going to do one line of code, and that's pretty much it. That's our signal defined. So what we've done is we've created a variable within this module which is more or less an instance of this signal, Django dispatch.signal, providing args. Now this is an optional thing, you don't necessarily have to include this, but because I want to pass an article ID across, it's more or less for documentation purposes. So the Jackson Django website says there's no actual code that will check to see whether you've defined this properly or not, but it's just good practice to basically put that in there. So providing args equals article ID. So if we go back to our approvals, there we have called the send method off that instance of the signal with a copy of self with an article ID. So it's customary to basically put that instance in there, but the article ID is what we've added as an extra. So that's our signal done. It's pretty much just a one-liner, just to say this is the kind of signal that we want to find especially for our purposes. And that's more or less how other signals are defined. It's more or less the creation of a signal instance, which is configured with these providing arguments and whatever, and then we more or less have that stored here. And then when we want to use it, if we went into any of the modules, we would just basically say from signals import article approved. Okay. Thought I was going to have to pause there because there's people outside making quite a bit of racket and not being very considerate for us YouTubers. Right, so we've created our signal inside of that model. Now we need to start using it inside of our articles. Now, to do that, we need to do a couple of imports, obviously. So the first thing is from our approval models, we want to import the approval model itself so that we can use it. And from our approvals signals file, we're going to import our signal. Next, we're going to import create two new functions. And as we saw last week, we have the receiver decorator in use. So our first function works off post save, and it's the post save signal for article. So whenever we save an article, if it is a newly created article, just under here, then we want to then automatically create an approval, and then from there we'll be sure that this article won't be displayed. Now all we're basically doing is creating an approval and passing in the article ID to the approval from our instance ID, which, if you remember last week's tutorial, is basically the instance of article. We're passing in the ID value for that, and we're just finally doing a little bit of logging. The next one, or the next signal receiver that we declare, is just article approved. Notice there's no sender in here. We're just basically saying anybody that sends this signal will trigger this code, and it's basically a function approve article with some keyword arguments, and we're gonna basically dip inside of the keyword arguments and look for the article ID. Now if you remember, in our approvals, when we sent our article approved signal, we passed in article ID here. So when it gets across to the receiver, it's inside the keyword arguments, and we just basically get the value out of that and assign it to ID. So we're saying search the article objects and get the one that matches this ID that we've pulled out of the keyword arguments. Then we set its approved status to true, and then we save, and that's pretty much it. Now I think I've just forgotten to mention that we did actually add a new field to the article as well. So we've added this approved field, which again is just a Boolean field, as it is the same inside of there. The reason why we add an approved field to the approval as well as the article is because this one is getting used as the articles filter inside of our articles template, which I'll show you next. This one is getting used to declare a tick box that we can then use in the admin pages when we're editing the approvals. And when we tick that box and save, that should automatically trigger our save method and send off this signal through the system. It sounds very complicated, but I'll show you in a minute in the actual web page, and everything will become a lot simpler. So those are our receivers set up. So then if we just save that, we need to then set up the filtering for our articles on the page so that this page here doesn't show anything that doesn't have an approved setting. So currently it just loops through each article and outputs them willy-nilly without even checking. So we're just basically going to add in an if statement into the template here, just to say if the article is approved, if that's true, then do all of this. If not, skip it, don't show it. So that's our filtering for the HTML. Now there are a few little things that we need to start just to configure also. The first thing that we need to configure obviously is that in our settings.py, in our installed apps section, we need to add in the new model, or the new app rather, that we've created for this tutorial, so that it recognizes that that's all done. We also, inside of our approvals section, need to create an admin.py so that the Django admin will search through here and include any registered models that we want, or anything that we want to register with the admin system, so that we can then edit approvals in the admin pages. So we import admin from the Django contrib modules, we import our approval, and then we just register using admin site register approval. So we register the approval model with the admin. That's pretty much that done also. So we've included a new model. We've set it up to send the signals whenever this gets saved with an approved status of true. We've set our receivers to say when we create a new article, then send off and create a brand new approval object and save it in the system. And whenever the approval is sent with an approved status of true, then find this article and set its status to true because it's been approved in the system. We've set our filtering to say only show the ones that have been approved. We've also created our signal within our app so that we know that we've definitely got a customized signal that we can send. Lots of S's in my sentences today. Never mind. And finally, we have registered our approval model with admin so that it can be used. Right, so that's all the coding done. What do we need to do on the command line? Well, the next thing we need to do is we need to create a schema migration for approvals using South, and then once we've done that, we create we've got to create our initial one first of all. Then obviously, because we've changed our article and we've added in this new field just at the top here, this new Boolean field, we need to create a migration for that. So schema migration article for that also. And then finally we need to do migrate, schema migration article -- auto, because we want it to be able to auto detect what's changed. Then finally we do our migrate, and that will update our database, and then we should find that we have inside of our local database the tables approval with the various fields in there, and then inside of article, which you should already have, you should find that there's a new field called approved. And if that's all gone through nicely, then you're doing well, and I think you're probably good to go. So the next thing is now to actually test it, and hopefully this still works. Definitely saved all my files. Okay, so let's create a new article. Test 2. Do a lot of both in there. And let's just have a little picture. That'll do fine. So create the article, and as you can see, it can't be seen on the page. Why not? Well, let's just go back to our admin, and in our articles we should see that it's saved definitely, but its approved status is not approved. So we've got an approval in here, and we should have an approval here, and this one should be set to article ID of 2, which is for that newly created article. And if we click approved here, then save, that will then send off the signal that we created, our custom signal, and then it should trigger the approval process inside of our code. So let's just do that, and let's just refresh this page. There you go. It now shows that test2 article as approved. Okay, that's the end of this tutorial. I hope that you learned something through this, and if you did, then please click the like button. And if you'd like to know more about our tutorials that we're doing in this series, or any other tutorials that we do in the future, then please click the subscribe button, and we'll send you a message as soon as that happens. Thanks for watching.